I'm very pleased to be joined by my guest, Seth Barron, who is a New York City-based reporter and editor. He's covered the local politics closely for more than 10 years. He's a writer, managing editor for The American Mind, and he has a new book out called The Last Days of New York, which sounds really foreboding. It's a history of New York City, simply from its recovery from the recession of 2008 and 2009, through the triple disaster of the pandemic, the civil riots, and the collapse in revenue of 2020. You can probably guess that Mayor Bill de Blasio who is now widely known as the worst mayor in the history of the city, and I would dare say the world, perhaps, is presented as the instrument of this decline, and also a key symptom of the rot that expedited the city's downfall. Seth Barron, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Sam. I'm glad to be here.
Well, I've been following your work for quite some time, and I was very excited to see that this book was coming out and that you were doing interviews. So I first want to thank you for coming on the program. And I want to ask you, I mean, this could not have been fun to write. You are a native, you're a native New Yorker, or you simply live in the city for many years?
I was born here, I grew up elsewhere, and then I moved back.
Yeah, okay, you count. You're a native New Yorker. I was a transplant New Yorker for many years. I was born on the West Coast, but I grew up outside the city and up and down the East Coast. And then I moved to New York City and lived there for many years. And I just remember going through some of these periods before de Blasio, before 2008. So you picked up where I left off. I left earlier, but that period of history, you know, it's funny that we seem to keep reliving history, but sometimes it's worse than others. And you picked up a time in history that has been just devastating for New York City. And it sounds like you don't think that there's a recovery in store.
Well, you know, never say never. Let's just say that it's, you know, the patient is critical and the prognosis is not good. But, you know, I mean, New Yorkers
are
resilient.
Is the patient in a nursing home with COVID?
Right, in a nursing home, ventilated, no hydrochloroquine, no zinc. The problem is that Bill de Blasio came to power in 2014. What makes him such a bad mayor, I mean, there have been other bad mayors, like Abe Beame in the 70s, under whom the city went into receivership. But he inherited a bad situation. David Dinkins came to power in the 80s, and crime soared under his administration, but he inherited the crack epidemic. Bill de Blasio came to power in 2014, inheriting a very safe and prosperous city. He didn't really have much to do to keep things going, but he inaugurated a period of what he called radical wealth distribution. This was his goal, his stated goal, and an effort to close the tale of two cities, what he's called the gap between the very wealthy and the very poor. Now, you know, look, we all want to help the poor, but there's ways to do it that work, and there are ways to do it that don't work. And he pursued the ways that don't work.
And so really he exacerbated the problem. And so the wealth gap is greater than it ever has been, right?
You know, it certainly isn't any narrower. In fact, it probably is greater. But here's the thing about the wealth gap. All right, New York City does have a lot of wealth inequality, but at the same time, 40% of New Yorkers are immigrants. So immigrants typically come here with very little or nothing, and they don't come here to have equality. Nobody moves to New York from some other country thinking, oh, let's go to New York where we can get, like, free food at the soup kitchen and kind of just scratch out a meager existence. I mean, they come here for opportunity. Historically, that's been the reason why people come here. Now, so wealth inequality, yes, It exists, but also there's a great deal of mobility, social mobility. People come here, they're poor, they work hard, their children go to school. Maybe their children go to one of the very excellent schools, the screen schools that
They
you have
don't
to test to
exist,
get
but
into.
okay.
Yeah, and then they improve their lives.
I'm sorry. I'm so against school these days.
Uh,
I was just talking about critical race theory. It's running rampant in our schools. It is child abuse. It is racism. And so I've gone completely overboard with warning parents about schools. Also, because the teachers that we have now have been produced by institutions and fully indoctrinated by those institutions that critical race theory must be taught regardless of what the board wants, regardless of what your employer wants. And so you have radical teachers out there who are saying, well, I'm going to teach it regardless. And I'm just going to slip it in so that I don't have to answer for it. The parents won't know. It'll just be between me and the kids. And so, but sorry, back to your point.
no,
They
it's a
come here for opportunity, and their opportunity has now been very much limited by the response to COVID and the actions of this mayor, right?
yes, I would say so. And regarding your point about critical race theory and the schools, it's absolutely true. One of the best schools in the country is Stuyvesant High School. It's a public high school in New York. It's highly selective. The only grounds for admission is a single test that you take when you're in eighth grade. Now, over the last few years, the last few decades, as Asian immigration has increased, the percentage of Black and Latino students in the selective schools has dropped precipitously to the point where, for Stuyvesant's entering class, they'll get maybe 5 or 6 Black students or fewer. Now, this is not because the test is racist. It's because the Asian students, who now comprise like 70% of the Stuyvesant class, study really hard and work really hard for uh, entry. This is like a major priority. So, is this racist? I would
Yes.
say yes, yes, absolutely. Well, no. So there's a big move now to eliminate the test, to eliminate all school screening. Well, this is the plan. I mean,
Well,
just
they
the other
don't want meritocracy.
it's
And here's the thing.
absolutely.
We've done away with meritocracy in politics. We've abolished meritocracy in our politics. And so therefore it will be abolished in our culture.
That's a good point. I mean, the other day, there's a junior high school in New York called the Lab School. It's another screened school. They just announced the other day that they're going to eliminate higher level math classes like algebra or algebra
Because
2.
math is racist. Did you not get that memo? Math is racist.
Yes, math is
I mean,
racist.
so, you are very well read and obviously highly intelligent. You can discuss anything that you want. I want to stick to your book because I want people to read your book. So rather than go off on that tangent that I'm sorry that I, I did
No,
on
you
you,
know
but
what? My book covers these questions.
oh,
So
excellent. Okay.
my book covers, just to let you know, my book covers crime, policing, education, fiscal policy, political corruption, electoral
Oh,
reform.
okay. Let's talk about that for just a minute.
Yeah.
I mean, your book is recent. Did you get everything in there about the idea that de Blasio pre-sold his memoir, but was paid in a money laundering scheme?
Cuomo pre-sold his
Sorry,
memoir.
Cuomo.
Right. Nobody's interested in reading de Blasio's memoir. I
That's
did not. I did not manage to get in the scandal concerning Cuomo's memoir, but I do talk about Cuomo as well. And some. I mean, certainly. Look, there's political corruption up and down uh, the scale in New York, and between De Blasio and Cuomo. Now, I mean, Cuomo until recently had not been shown to be venal personally, but yes, the scandal of the nursing homes and his memoir was certainly bad. It was certainly bad.
Maybe that's your next book then.
Well, actually, yeah.
Actually, yes.
Well, I'm working on it.
Yay. So back to de Blasio. My bad. I thought Giuliani was a formidable mayor. I thought he was phenomenal. A man not without flaws, as we all are. And yet, under him, I think he came right after Dinkins.
That's right.
And he precipitated the steepest drop in crime because of, in my understanding, it was the broken windows policy. Do you do anything in the book that compares his policies with de Blasio's for, for edification? Because you can't just lay everything at somebody's feet if you can't show how it might have been differently. Do you know what I mean?
I absolutely do, Sam, and I'm glad you brought that up because that's how I begin the book. I lay out basically the history of crime in New York briefly from like the 50s and 60s on, and how crime started to rise after the 60s, got bad during the 70s, and then got atrocious during the 80s. And that's right.
Uh-oh, you froze. Darn it. Okay, here's the thing. Your Seth Barron is with me, and the Zoom link, I guess, is something, but I will get him back. I'm going to take a quick break here. The name of the book is The Last Days of New York, and it's a history of New York City. And so I'm going to take a quick break here, and I'll be right back with Seth Barron. But if you're listening on radio, please do go get a copy of the book, The Last Days of New York. I'm sure that the ending is somewhat uplifting as well, because he does go into both sides of the coin. And so we can have a good understanding of what went wrong and why, and what to do about it. Stay tuned. I'll be right back for those of you not listening on radio.